Producer Chris here, and your Ben Joravsky Show starts now.
Hello again, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Free Speech Wednesday, and here's why. I believe in free speech. Joanna Klonsky standing by, political consultant, political strategist extraordinaire. I'm going to pick her brain on all the big issues of the day, and I know she believes in free speech as well. The reason this is on my mind, and Joanna, just so you know, people say, Ben, you rant and rail. This is my attempt to be calm. So many times I try to be calm. Let's see how long it lasts. I'm like Stephen A. Smith. I was seeing Stephen A. Smith today on the Instagram dropping where he was talking about his confrontation with LeBron James the other day. And he started off being really calm and cool. Next thing you know, he's dropping the F-bomb. Just lost his whatever. Anyway, so this is on my mind a lot. Mahmoud Khalil, the activist from Columbia University, was scooped up by ICE officials over the weekend, and dispatched to Louisiana, a federal prison in Louisiana, a holding cell, one step from being deported. I'm not sure where they would send him. I guess Syria. That's where he's from originally, I want to say, or where he grew up. But it's not certain where they would send him. And this was very disturbing on many, many fronts. The fact that the federal government could just scoop somebody up without presenting them with any formal charges, without presenting any kind of evidence of what wrongdoing, even if you are offended by the positions that Khalil takes defending Palestinian rights, if for some reason that triggers you and gets you filled with contempt, you have to realize that we are a democracy and that the government should not have the authority just to scoop people up on the streets and throw them into prison because they don't like what they say. And you would think this concept would be emblazoned in the brains of everybody in America today, because this is one of the core, if you believe them, core essential liberties that are declared as sacred by the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement says they are dedicated to the notion of free speech. And I'll give you a contrast. I'm being calm and cool. See this, Joanna? I've lasted 2 minutes. I'm no Stephen A. Smith. There was a gentleman named Bryce Mitchell. That name is probably unfamiliar to many of my listeners. He is a mixed martial arts fighter in the UFC, Ultimate Fighting Champion. And about January, he did a podcast where he said Hitler is a good guy, the Holocaust is not real. And then he said a whole bunch of other things where just are too ugly for me to want to repeat. If you care to find what he said about Jews and gays and Hitler, you could just Google it. It happened. Bryce Mitchell is his name. In the aftermath, Dana White, who is the president of the UFC and a dear friend and ally of Donald Trump, said that while he found what Mitchell said offensive and stupid, he was not going to punish him, kick him out of the UFC, prevent him from fighting in the UFC because he believes in free speech. That's what he said. Dana White said that. He believes in free speech. So, let me get this straight. Bryce Mitchell has the right to these absolutely toxic Nazi propaganda, hatred of Jews and gays. He has a free speech right to declare that. But Mahmoud Khalil does not have a free speech right to what? Champion Palestinian rights. One man should be immediately punished and deported without any evidence presented as to what he did, sent back to wherever, and the other man gets to fight. I would say there's a huge double standard here that's pretty obvious when it comes not only to free speech, but to attitude toward Jewish people. So if you are a defender of Palestinian rights, you are automatically anti-Semitic in the eyes of the MAGA movement, and you should be punished. If you are a Nazi spewing some of the most vitriolic anti-Jewish hate, you are protected by free speech and should be allowed to continue whatever you want to do. I just want to say this. I find that so offensive. What Mitchell said, I found the most offensive thing, but the fact that there is just utter silence on the part of MAGA and free speech champions. Joe Rogan, I'm reaching out to you. Once again, I'm reaching out to you. You're an advocate for free speech. I expect you to stand up and take a stand on behalf of free speech rights. But this double standard is scary on several fronts, one of which the Jewish people. It's like, I don't see there's any evidence that Khalil said anything that was remotely anti-Jewish. He was very critical of Israel's policies, absolutely. But Bryce Mitchell, man, go listen. You could find it. And that little Weasley apology he gave was such focusing. And by the way, Mitchell is also another ally of Donald Trump. Scary times in the United States of America. Scary times indeed. Joanna Klonsky, welcome back to my humble little podcast.
Yeah, scary times. Thanks for having me to discuss the scary times.
Yes, a lot of scary times, a lot of scary issues. We will close with, I don't know, maybe they're optimistic issues, but fights that you should know about. So let's not forget the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, okay? Just do not allow this conversation to end without
We're going to end on a here's what you can actually do instead of just bemoaning our fate note.
Yes,
that's the plan.
Exactly. Your thoughts about what's happening with Khalil. And as we speak, just so everybody knows, while we're recording this, there's a hearing, I think, in New York right now. A judge is hearing the case. The Trump administration is going to be pushing hard to deport him immediately. And so I don't know the outcome of that. It's happening right now. But Joanna, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with what you said. As always, I never understand why you expect better of MAGA or send a message to Joe Rogan or whatever. I don't see the point in that. Of course, the MAGA movement is full of contradictions. Of course, they constantly contradict themselves and they're hypocrites and they're full of double standards. It's kind of their thing. I don't think they care what we think, if we think they're being morally consistent or not. There's a lot of other pieces to this puzzle that are important, though. As you and I are both Jewish, as we watch Jewish advocacy groups like the Anti-Defamation League condone this sort of thing and even celebrate it, that we should, and fellow members of our Jewish community celebrating this, that we should really be concerned about. This isn't the kind of thing that they just do to the one guy and then never do it again. And everything that has ever happened in the history of Jews shows us that eventually it comes down on us too. So this isn't a moment where we can take comfort in the protection of the Trump administration. I'm using air quotes if you can't see me, that they're standing up against anti-Semitism. What we know is that these people are anti-Semites themselves. We've got Elon Musk throwing up a Nazi salute, for God's sakes. They don't care about the Jews, about keeping us safe, about from the Palestinian protesters. This isn't about Jewish safety. It makes Jews less safe. And I think it's really important that we name it, and also that we identify when the organizations that are supposed to be advocating on our behalf are actually, again, making us less safe by condoning, by celebrating this kind of attack on freedom of speech and civil liberties. There is no, as far as anyone can tell, there's no legal basis for this. The man hasn't committed a crime. What he did was say things that Donald Trump and his cronies don't like in a protest. And whatever you think about the Columbia protests, about the student protests across the country last year against the targeting of civilians in Gaza by the Israeli government with using US dollars to pay for it, you could agree with that war effort or not. But the whole thing about America is that you should be able to speak freely and protest without fear of political repression. Now, of course, there's a lot of history in this country of that not proving to not be the case, but this is one of the most stark incidents in decades, and we should all be speaking out very loudly against it, especially Jewish groups, because of our history. So I don't think Donald Trump cares if we think he's a hypocrite. I think he kind of does that on purpose. That's his whole thing.
Well, I agree with you on that point, but I will never stop pointing out the hypocrisy.
I'm not saying not to point it out.
No, and I tell you why I think it's so important, because I spend a lot of time. We're going to get into this with the Senate vote that's coming up on a resolution to keep the government funded. But I'm always thinking about, are there any themes or principles that could unite, could unite the left with MAGA. And a lot of it is so preposterous. And I know this because I listen to what the MAGA people say so much, and I follow what Joe Rogan says a lot, and I see what is being promoted. And but there is one concept that they hammer over and over and over again, and so that's why I'm not going to let them get away with it. And that is free speech and liberty. That is the core. In fact, today's New York Times has a story about, I'm not making this up, Joanna, Mel Gibson wants to get gun rights back. He's got a Second Amendment right to have a gun, even though he pled, I think it was guilty to domestic battery charges about 13 years ago. And a Justice Department official said he shouldn't just be given the right to have a gun back. And they were, he has a sacred Second Amendment right. They're always proclaiming rights other people don't have. I will read to you this section. I sent this to you, but I'm going to read this to you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is Michelle Goldberg, the New York Times columnist. She wrote an excellent column, in my humble opinion, about how the Khalil case is the greatest threat to free speech since the Red Scare. And this is in this sentence here. I'll read this to you, Joanna. Get your thoughts about this. Today, this is from Michelle Goldberg. Today, pro-Palestinian campus demonstrators are widely despised, just as leftists were during the Red Scare. I wouldn't be surprised if Khalil's arrest proves popular, but that won't make it any less shameful or alarming. I wouldn't be surprised if Khalil's arrest proves popular. Your thoughts?
This is the whole thing. To me, she's right that, in civil rights movement, polls showed that the public wasn't necessarily on the side, the public writ large, not if you break down by demographic, wasn't necessarily on the side of the protesters at first. I heard somebody say yesterday that after Kent State, the vast majority of Americans thought that the students who were killed, brought it on themselves. So the point shouldn't be that we put our finger in the wind and decide based on what's popular. It's the same conversation we're having, and I know we'll get to this later, about trans rights and trans kids being able to play sports. This is an issue that doesn't necessarily have the majority of the electorate aligned. We can't make decisions about our rights and civil liberties and protecting the vulnerable based on putting our finger in the wind and deciding, well, is this popular right now or not? I don't know, I haven't seen any polling on this. It obviously just happened with Khalil. I don't know if she'll, it depends on how they ask the question, as always. I don't know if Michelle Goldberg will prove right on that front. It shouldn't matter.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter. And she actually was making that point, too, in defense of Michelle Goldberg. She was making that point. All right, let's move on to other topics. We have a lot to cover before we get to that Supreme Court election in the state of Wisconsin. And I've got to hear, you mentioned trans, so we'll go to the trans issue.
Let's get me ranting, Ben, why don't we?
Yeah, okay. The new calm me will probably end at this stage because it has to do with Mayor Rahm and Gavin Newsom. And so, again, Joanna Klonsky is a political strategist. She's always trying to think about how she can win re-election or election for her clients. And so clearly Gavin Newsom and Rahm Emanuel have decided that they could win future elections by beating up on trans people. And Rahm went on the Bill Maher show. We've talked about it at length on this show with a couple guests, and made an absolutely asinine, quote unquote, joke about how he wanted to go into the girls' bathroom in seventh grade.
That was a really weird thing to say.
Yeah. I'm not sure what he was going to do in the bathroom.
From.
Yeah. And then Gavin Newsom brought on Charlie Kirk and said he was against, he took the big, strong stand against trans in women's sports. So your thoughts about all this? What are they up to?
Well, they've seen polling that shows people don't really understand this issue, and they don't want that. The question about should trans people be allowed to play sport on the team that they're not biologically assigned to is one that Americans struggle with. But this is just like what we were saying before. The Democratic Party can't be the space where we just abandon all of our history of fighting for civil rights and for protecting the vulnerable people in our communities. It seems like the trans kids who want to play sports, by the way, very small portion of the population. How often is this even coming up? Not very. But that those kids should suddenly be the ones to go directly under the bus in the interest of the expediency of these white guy politicians who have nothing to lose. The Rahm stuff really struck me because of his weird off-color joke on Bill Maher about, as you mentioned, about wanting to go in the girls' bath. If I could have said they and gone into the girls' bathroom in 7th grade, I would have done it. Like, okay, good to know. Like I said, maybe keep that one to yourself. You were a sexual creep as a teenage boy, I guess. Oh, yeah, thanks for sharing. But I think that the bigger question is politically, how do we handle these trans issues? And they are complicated. I think it's fair to recognize that people are struggling with this. It's kind of even though there have always been trans people, some of these questions about how trans folks interact with the rest of society in 2025 are new to a lot of people, and people are still learning about how this works and what it means. And so I think it's fair to create space to have the conversation without just saying, all right, we're going to ditch those kids and throw them directly under the bus. We're not going to advocate for them. We're not going to protect them. We're not going to make sure that they have the right to live in their full identity and their full selves and interact with the spaces that they want to interact in and know that they can feel safe. We're going to let these right-wing, in some case, literal Nazis, use them as a punching bag and as a punchline. That isn't supposed to be who we are, but it seems like some of these politicians are seeing an opportunity in the moment to say, yeah, actually, that is who we're going to be today. It's fun. We can bro out. We can giggle with these right-wingers, and it's some common ground that we can identify. We can give these guys a platform like Gavin Newsom is doing. People are, I think, maybe rightfully so, not paying a lot of attention to this Gavin Newsom thing and catching this important detail, which is not that he's not going on these right-wing podcasts and saying this stuff. It's his podcast. Gavin Newsom started a podcast, which I'm not sure that's the best use of his time as a taxpayer-funded, taxpayer-paid governor of California that's facing many urgent crises. But setting that aside, it's his podcast, and his first two guests are right-wing Yahoo Ben Shapiro and right-wing Yahoo Steve Bannon, and who knows who he'll invite next week.
Charlie Kirk, not Shapiro.
I'm sorry. How could I make such a mistake? Thank you.
It's okay.
So here we are, and we have to wonder, what is this strategy? Why is Gavin Newsom taking time out of his day to create a platform and then specifically dedicate his platform to these right-wingers?
Yeah.
Maybe he's playing some long game and we're going to understand it all in the end. I don't think so. That's not what it looks like to me.
Well, what is the strategy? And how successful could it be? Remember, ladies and gentlemen, I presume Newsom wants to run for president in 2028. To be president, he has to win the Democratic nomination unless he's thinking of switching parties. And this is all a prelude to becoming a Republican. I don't know how this would help him in a Democratic primary. Go ahead, Joanna.
Well, look, the Democratic Party is not winning. It's not hashtag winning right now. The Democratic Party is not super popular right now.
Yeah.
Everyone in my world, and I'm sure in yours, loves to bemoan the lack of a clear message. Where's the fight? Where's the Democrats? They're so weak. They're so lily-livered. They're so mealy-mouthed. And so it's tactically smart of these guys to put some distance between themselves and the Democratic Party, such as it is. By the way, what's the Democratic Party? I don't know. What is it, like DNC chairman Ken Martin or something? Like, there isn't really like some room where everyone's making these strategic decisions together. I think that's kind of a myth. It doesn't really exist on the right either, by the way. There's no Republican Party. There's just Trump and a cult around him. We just aren't in a cult. So it feels like we're not unified by comparison.
True.
So I just say that to say it's smart of them to be finding ways to differentiate themselves from this unpopular, sort of nebulous, weak, perceived entity of the Democratic Party. But the fact that they chose this particular issue of beating up on trans kids and also of platforming, MAGA lunatics is where we run into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Just think about the inherent contradiction of what you just said. Much of the criticism generated at Democrats these days is being targeted by real Democrats who are upset that Democrats aren't standing up strong to MAGA and Trump. And so what is Gavin Newsom doing? He's bowing to MAGA and Trump. He's giving a platform. He's doing the very thing that the Democratic activists, the people who will be, by and large, Joanna, determining the next Democratic nominee. Say what you will about the Democratic Party. There are some hardcore believers out there who are already trying to figure out, like, well, I guess they have the midterms ahead of it. So the very people that will determine who the nominee will be are the ones that his behavior is upsetting.
Yeah, I mean,
Can't see
I don't think it's
any
like a stroke of
logic.
genius, no.
I'm like,
Well, look, after the presidential race, I think a lot of people were talking about how Kamala Harris should have gone on more of the quote unquote manosphere bro podcasts like Rogan and the other really a lot of the top most popular podcasts in this country right now are right-leaning white men podcasts. And they did appear on some of them. It seems like Rogan played a lot of games to basically avoid booking her. But the question is, should we be engaging in dialogue with these spaces, or does that equate to platforming them? And I think we have no choice but to engage with some of this stuff and make sure that we have surrogates talking to their audience that's growing and strengthening. Yeah. But that's not the same thing as what Gavin Newsom's doing, which is literally inviting them on his show and broing out with them.
Yeah, broing out with them. By the way, one more time, Joe Rogan, I know you're a big listener to the show. I'm ready to go to Austin anytime. I think I could maybe even talk Joanna into joining me. We'll come on your show. And I look forward to the invitation. I would love to
go on Rogan.
Yeah, and we could talk liberty and free speech. If nothing else, we'll talk liberty and free speech. And I know you agree with me on this, Joe Rogan, because I've seen your show so many years.
You really listen to Joe Rogan, bud?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, so just so you know, the Joe Rogan show, when he drops an episode, is like 3 hours long. It's even longer than my show. Yeah, so, but when I watch the shorts and the clips, and sometimes I'll just go in and, who did he just have on that? He had, this is ancient baby boomer stuff. He had Bill Murray on. And there were some funny moments in there. So, yes, I confess, Joanna.
You're a white man.
Yeah, I am.
You're in the manosphere.
I want to do that with Joe. All right, let's just.
Well, we forgot to say, apparently Rahm Emanuel says he's running for president.
Yes, that's what I was
according to Politico today.
Come on, help me out with that one, Joe. Rahm wants to run for president. Go ahead.
I don't know. You go.
Well,
where to begin?
Let me put it this way. I have no doubt that in the back of his mind or the front of his mind, all around his mind, Rahm thinks that he would be a great president. I have no doubt that he has the ambition to be the president of the United States. Getting there from where he is right now that's a tough one. That's a tough call. I find Rahm one of the most disingenuous, fraudulent characters I've ever encountered in Chicago politics. And that's quite a statement, Joanne. I've been around for a long time, as you know. Everything the guy does at any given moment is politically calculated, and he's willing to sell out whatever position he has taken at any given moment if he thinks that's to his advantage. And the trans issue is just one of them. You pointed this out to me. I had forgotten this, that under Rahm, didn't they pass some legislation or he signed an executive order? I can't remember which one it was.
I was there that day. It was 2016.
You can talk about it when you riff. So my point is, I've seen him do this on immigration. I've seen him do this on gun control. I've seen him do this on gay rights. And now he's doing it on trans rights. He will betray any supposed anchored belief he allegedly has. And I mean, that's gotten him far, I would say, to a certain degree. It's gotten him far. It's gotten tremendous prominence. Politico loves him. CNN loves him. Who else? Washington Post loves him. But I don't think it's the ticket to get to the White House, because you will betrayed. Once again, he has to win the Democratic primary. You have betrayed too many constituents in the Democratic primary. So that's my general thoughts about Rahm. Go ahead.
I have a lot of thoughts. Okay, first of all, people are talking about Rahm for a lot of different things right now. I've heard his name thrown around for governor of Illinois. Should J.B. Pritzker not run again or run for U.S. president? People have talked about U.S. Senate if Dick Durbin doesn't run again, which is unclear right now. Some people are throwing around Rahm for Mayor 3.0, 2027 versus Mayor Brandon Johnson. I mean, I think he's sort of enjoying the fact that no one knows what he's going to do next. So he's like, yeah, sure, maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll run for president of the United States. maybe I'll run for this, maybe I'll run for that. You never know where I'm at, and he kind of likes that, I think, that energy. He does have a lot of options right now if he wants to run for office as an Illinois and Chicago person, because we just don't know where these sort of chess pieces are going to move about in the 2026 and 2027 elections and 2028 elections. So J.B. Pritzker could not run for a third term, leaving that seat open. He could decide he does want to run and then use that as a launching pad to launch his JB's presidential. Dick Durbin could say, you know what, I'm going to go for another term. I feel good. I'm ready for the fight. I want to keep leading the, Democrats on judiciary. Or he could decide, okay, it's time for me to pass the torch to the next generation, leaving that seat open. That might be a next step for Rahm. So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of places that Rahm can move. And there are things, despite we on the left and our frustrations with him, I think there are things that appeal about him. There are things that he's good at. There's a reason we're still talking about him after multiple decades of talking about him. But anyway, I think what he's good at is getting attention. He didn't get out. I mean, I thought it was a weird comment, but he didn't get out there and say the thing he said about going in the girls' bathroom for no reason. He thought it would be an attention grabber. I actually thought it got less attention than he was hoping for. I think a lot of people saw that and kind of rolled their eyes and were like, okay, Rahm, we see what you're doing. We're not going to give you the thing you were hoping you would evoke, which is like a bunch of outrage on the left, thereby giving you the thing you were hoping for. So, but he's generally good at it, and the other thing is that again, like Michelle Goldberg, I'm guessing about polling, but I'm guessing that if you polled him right now in Chicago, he's probably more popular than he was when he left office. I'm guessing his numbers have recovered pretty significantly. And I'm guessing that he's perceived today as a pretty competent, effective leader, even though there are people who have the reaction you just had to that. And so he has some assets to play with when he re-enters he's been, in Tokyo doing whatever things he's been doing in Tokyo for 4 years. He's re-entering the political space, and he has some tools at his disposal, some assets at his disposal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was there in 2016 when I don't remember the details of it either, but we passed some kind of, one of the first pieces of trans-oriented bathroom legislation in Chicago that I think just created like a mandate for government buildings to offer a gender-neutral bathroom option. I remember it because I was in the room that day, and I remember how it was one of the first times I've ever really heard this issue debated, and some of the aldermen responded in kind of an offensive and bigoted way, echoes of which we're hearing today. Even all these years, even after, what has it been, 9 years of now getting familiar, especially with the bathroom issue, everyone has some more facility with understanding it politically and how it gets used by the right. You're still hearing people talk about it much the same way that we were in 2016, in that very moment that Rahm created by championing the issue at the time. So
yeah. I will close. I got this text message. I just have to read this text message from a listener. When he heard me talking about Rahm, let me just find it right now. This is classic Rahm. So here, I'm now going to read this text message from a listener. Shout out, Michael. Thank you for sending this. Quote, my wife's friend recently met Rahm Emanuel, and she accidentally offended him, and he was an asshole. Her husband told me the story yesterday. He spotted Rahm and went up to say hi. He told him that they had met back when he was working for Misericordia, which prompted Rahm to give some canned comment about how great that group is. But then his wife leans in and asks him, so where do you live now? And Rahm looks at her and says, quote, I am the fucking ambassador to Japan, and turns around and storms off. And I just laugh at that.
Okay.
He's such an asshole.
Sounds like she was just making small talk.
Yeah, man, where you living now? And it's a legit question, because I'm sure he wasn't the ambassador at the time. Anyway,
okay, whatever.
That's Rahm. That's our guy. That's our guy, Chicago. Heck of a job on that election, Chicago.
Yikes. Okay.
All right. Let's go back to Washington, and we'll talk about the continuing budget resolution. It passed in the House the other day. I'm losing track of time. One Democrat voted for it. and one Republican voted against it. The Democrat was, I'm doing this, I can't believe I still remember this, is a Democratic congressman from Maine, where they have ranked choice voting, Joanna. So this gentleman is in a district, follow me on this, I believe it went 10% point, it was for Trump by 10 points. So like 55 to 45. He's in a pretty MAGA district.
Yeah.
So yeah, I gotta, even me, old lefty Ben, gotta give him a little attitude here on that vote. The one Republican is a diehard budget guy, Massey from Kentucky, I believe it is, who is championing the concept of fighting the mounting deficit, a cause Republicans gave up years ago. Now it goes to the Senate. Your thoughts on whether the Democrats in the Senate should vote for this to keep the government funded, or should they take a stand? Go ahead.
All right. So a couple things we have to remind people. First of all, the Republican Party has a trifecta right now. They control both houses of Congress. They control the executive branch. So the idea that it's our responsibility as Democrats to stop a government shutdown, we just have to reject that out of hand. If there's a government shutdown, that's on the Republican Party for not being able to pull a coalition together to pass their continuing resolution and not negotiating in good faith with Senate leaders to come to an agreement that enough vote, they could put enough Democratic votes on. So it passed the Senate, it passed the House. Most Democrats voted no, as you mentioned. In the Senate, for it to pass, they need some Democratic votes. They need 7 votes. So this is like happening today. By the time we finish this podcast, it might have already happened. It seems like some Senate Democrats are very wary of being blamed, voting this thing down or not putting enough votes on it, and thereby being blamed by Trump and the Republicans for creating a government shutdown. Senator John Fetterman said this. He said, I'm never going to vote to shut the government down. It sounds like Schumer is worried about the politics of it. I think that's a framing that's very dangerous for us. Again, it's incumbent on the Republican leadership, John Thune, the Trump administration. Donald Trump himself was making calls on this yesterday. We know he was calling everyone. He was putting pressure on Massey, who you mentioned. So the Republicans have to present a CR, a continuing resolution bill that is negotiated in good faith with the Democrats and that can get those 7 votes. To me, they haven't done that. This CR has a lot of bad stuff in it. It's got a lot of cuts that nobody should support. And it's basically, they've just turned this continuing resolution. It's not a clean continuing resolution, which is to say just a continuation of what Congress has already voted to pass for funding the government. It has cuts in it. It creates basically a slush fund for Elon and his cronies and his bros to just do what they want with. We never want a government shutdown, of course. The main driver of the dynamics towards a shutdown are these Republicans in Congress who have not negotiated a good deal that is going to be supportive of the American public. Once we open the door to signing on to this kind of stuff, it just creates a really bad precedent down the road. So to me, I'm hopeful that the Senate will not put the votes on the board for this. The Senate Democrats, I think that would be a really harmful move. Even though, as you know, I represent federal workers local, a government shutdown would be absolutely devastating for them. They're also being devastated by the language in the CR. So in either direction, there's massive harm happening. And this is a moment where Senate Democrats have to hold the line and force more negotiations and force a better bill. And I'm worried that they might not be doing that right now.
Well, they're not. And any issue. So just think again about the inherent contradictions. Seems to be the theme of this show. The inherent contradictions embedded in this issue, Joanna. MAGA, Trump, since he got sworn into office, has not the concept of negotiating with Democrats, of compromising with Democrats is so foreign and so alien. He's proclaimed he has the executive authority to do all kinds of things, massive firings of people whose jobs have been funded by the government. Scoop some guy up out of his house, his apartment in New York, and dispatch him to Louisiana without any without any proof or evidence, or even a real allegation of wrongdoing. They could do whatever they want. And so now all of a sudden, this is the one chance that Democrats have to get some kind of compromise from MAGA, from the Republicans, from Trump, and they're throwing it away if the votes are
I
there.
think it's reasonable to expect that the Senate Democrats could fight for example, a clean CR for a couple of weeks of more government funding while the negotiations continue, instead of just folding up right now. That's a reasonable ask. That's a realistic prospect that can be done, I think. And so if you are listening to this and the vote hasn't happened yet, call your senator, make sure they're voting right away, because it's pretty important.
Yeah, and I also think it plays again to the larger strategy, if there is one, of the Democratic Party. And you had a good point. But what is the Democratic Party? Does it even exist? Is it just a name? And if this is a moment when they should be a Democratic Party, like this is their chance to actually force a compromise on all those other issues that I pointed out. Trump is just doing what he wants, and it's up to advocacy groups to file lawsuits, and you hope a federal judge rules in your favor and ultimately goes to the Supreme Court. Lord knows how they're going to rule. But this is a chance where the Democratic Party could flex some muscle and to just walk away from that.
This is when the Democrats in the House, by and large, held the line and held strong and made it clear we're not doing this, Golden aside. So we want to see that same energy from the Senate.
So what would your advice be to Jared Golden, the Democratic representative from Maine who voted with the Republicans?
Yeah, I mean, look, I am sympathetic to him in the same way that you mentioned. I don't know exactly. I think it was a red +6 maybe Trump district that he represents, and I understand. I'm sympathetic to the dynamics. Obviously, I would have preferred he held the line, but I understand. People. We've got to grapple with the reality that we don't have that much power right now. We've got to hold strong wherever we can as Democrats. But also this comes down to this. The bottom line is it comes down to the Senate.
Yeah.
So that's where we actually can make a significant difference.
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to classic Betty J flip-flop. I'm going to flip-flop what I said. I reserve the right to flip-flop.
3 minutes.
I'm like, dude, they're not going to beat you on this issue. You got ranked choice voting. You're going to win. I just thought about it, Joanna. You're not going to lose in this.
He's generally seen as a person with a bright political future ahead of him.
Say that again?
He's generally seen as a person with a bright political future ahead of him.
So he wants to run for Susan Collins' seat. And she's the senator from Maine. I know all my listeners know that because they're junkies. And so, okay. But I think taking a stand for whatever values you have would enhance that. And so I take back what I said. I don't. Sorry.
You know what's great about you, Ben, is that you take a position and then you just stand 10 toes down on it and really.
Well, I have this unfortunate propensity to think about what I said and go, do I agree with what I just said? You say so many things when you have a podcast or when you write columns. You always have, what do you think about this? And by the way, Joanna Klonsky's the same way. Yeah. When you're even here right now, it's like 90% of what you hear if you call Joanna up on the phone and ask her for a opinion.
I don't deny it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's okay to change your mind when you are presented with more information or think more deeply about it too. Okay.
Well, you gave a compelling argument, and I said, you know what, that makes sense. All right. Well,
actually, I don't think Golden is the problem that we have.
No, it's not. And by the way, even if he voted for it, it still would have passed.
Yeah, he's not.
It was just okay. All right, which brings me to the Al Green question, this. Man, I got to get
the greatest singers of all time.
Thank you. I've made that joke every time. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to make that joke anymore. But each guest comes on and makes that joke. And I give you credit. Shout out Mike and Sue Klonsky for teaching her who Al Green is.
Of course.
A lot of millennials come on. They have no idea who that Al Green is. So
no, people know who Al Green is. Come on.
You know what millennials like to defend themselves on these issues? But I guarantee you, I'll
like
put you right
Kanye's
now.
always sampling Al Green.
Okay, but that doesn't mean they know who he is. I'll put it to you this way: if we did a poll of all your millennial friends and you didn't cheat and told them ahead, I don't think 50% would know who Al Green is.
I don't know. That seems
They
low.
may know Congressman Al Green. They don't know Memphis Al Green. All right, now let's get back to Al Green. He got up. This is Keena Collins. Shout out Keena. She was on the show yesterday. Dropping tomorrow, and she said this. I was like, wow, that's so smart. So Al Green gets up there at the State of the Union speech, Joanna, and confronts Trump and said, "You don't have a mandate on." I think he said Medicaid and Medicare cuts, which is absolutely true. Absolutely freaking true. And at that stage, what Keena said was the Democrats should have if not all of them, a good chunk of them should have walked out when he got kicked out, just to let him know. And that put the attention, the focus on what he said, which is you're cutting Medicaid. Make that the issue.
Yeah.
Instead, these Dems, man, they go on the Sunday talk shows. I'm outraged. That was too far. That's disrespectful. We need protocol. Come on, Joanna. I need some help here.
There's a whole bunch of Democrats who voted to censure Congressman Green.
None of them did. Yeah.
Look, I mean, I think the whole debate about Al Green, first of all, I loved the photo. I don't know if you saw the photo of him holding up the cane, but I thought it was an iconic photo. I think the whole debate about respectability and decorum and should Democrats have done more disruption or should they have held up their little signs? Should they have bigger little signs? They held up these stupid little signs. Should their signs have been different? I don't think most of that, when you talk about do people pay attention, are people even paying attention to this? I don't think most of this even broke through. I don't think most Americans have the slightest idea what the Democrats were doing that day. Trump is the master of attention, and Trump was the one who held the floor during that speech and was able to use it as an opportunity to move his message. And I don't think there was a whole hell of a lot that the Democrats were going to be able to do to break through that. Even if they had all gotten up together and screamed, well, maybe if they had done that, but that was never going to happen. I don't think there was a whole hell of a lot. So I don't think the question about Al Green and his cane and his disruption and the censure vote and the little paddle signs, I don't think most of that broke through at all. And it's not really where the main battlefield of all of this is happening. Of course, you have to fight in every front, but I just don't think this question about decorum is even the question that we should all, I think it's like an insider, like, punditry, chatter in class question that is totally disconnected from real people and what they're struggling with. We've got to make sure that we're keeping this grounded, as you said, in what this really means for people, which is like, what does it mean that they're cutting Medicaid? Yeah. And what does it mean that they're going to go after Social Security? Things that were always supposed to be third rails in American politics. What does it mean that they're trying to destroy the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Education? What does that mean for actual people and their actual lives day to day? And not get so bogged down in the palace intrigue on Capitol Hill. Whoa, who's being nice to who and who's being mean to who? I think it's a mistake.
I agree. And I thought that Keenan's right to that point, that they lost an opportunity to really put on up front what reality of what MAGA is doing. And you're right. Social Security is next.
Yes.
And Musk is talking.
They've made no bones about it. They've made it plain.
They made that point. Musk has said it. And I know a lot of seniors in my life, a lot of boomers in my life. And I know you have some in your life too, Joanna, even though you're of the millennialistic persuasion. And they're concerned. They're worried about it.
I also have disabled people in my life who depend on Social Security Administration for disability benefits and support. I also hope to one day be old and enjoy what I've paid into for Social Security and Medicare.
That's so true.
So, this is obviously, everybody should find this deeply concerning. And the thing is, Republican voters rely on these programs just like Democrats do.
Yeah.
Just like Republican voters also rely on the CDC and to not get diseases, and the FDA to make sure their food isn't contaminated, and the Environmental Protection Agency to make sure that they're not breathing cancer-causing chemicals every day. So we've got this is I think the most important point for me as I think about messaging and how Democrats should be messaging is like, we've got to make it clear what these cuts literally mean for you and how it hurts you. Not you, Ben Joravsky, although you are one of the people I'm talking about, but for Americans.
I hear you. Yes, and me too, because I'm rapidly approaching that. I'm taking that Social Security, and that will be paying for this Ben Joravsky empire. All right. We talked to a good friend of yours and mine, Nicole Cantello. She was on the show. It dropped on Monday. I urge everybody to check that out. She talked about the devastating impacts of the EPA and real concerns for folks. And they're a client of Joanna. So we'll avoid repeating. And anything you want to say of that before we close with Wisconsin?
Yeah, I'll just say, yes, I'm the communications consultant for the American Federation of Government Employees Local 704, which is the union that represents 1,000 US EPA workers across the Midwest. And they're headquartered here in Chicago. And today they announced, or really yesterday, they announced that EPA is going to eliminate the Office of Environmental Justice entirely. What that means, environmental justice, just simply means they're triaging communities, focusing attention in communities that are disproportionately impacted by environmental harm, pollution, toxins. We got places like the Southeast Side here in Chicago that have had sort of cumulative impact of decades of pollution that have hit their community the hardest. Lee Zeldin, who's the EPA administrator under Trump, he calls this forced discrimination program. It just shows you how they think about these things. Forced discrimination is such an insidious term to use to describe a program that's just designed to protect people who are disproportionately harmed by polluters. But what they're sending the signal to corporate polluters is just you do what you want. Don't worry about it. We got your back. So that's today's disheartening news from the US EPA.
Yeah, no, it's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah.
And because this is the air you breathe and the water you drink, folks.
It is. It is.
And it doesn't get more real than that.
Yeah.
All right, folks, there's a showdown election in the state of Wisconsin. I believe it's April 1st.
Yep.
I should have written it down. Got it right. It's a Supreme Court battle. Seems like the state of Wisconsin is always having a pivotal Supreme Court battle to determine the balance in their state Supreme Court, to determine the future of laws and politics in Wisconsin on a wide range of issues. Joanna, why don't you take a deep dive in this?
Yeah, I just wanted to call our attention, since we're here in Chicago or Illinois, we're right over the border. This election will determine the ideological balance of the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. It'll determine the future of abortion rights and access in Wisconsin, LGBTQ rights and access in Wisconsin. We've got to think about future election certification, all kinds of things that are really important. We've got a right-wing MAGA candidate named Brad Schimmel, who has benefited from $8 million of support from our friend Elon Musk. That should tell you pretty much everything you need to know about him. The opponent is Democrat Susan Crawford. So encourage you, if you're the type of person to donate or get involved in supporting. This is a lot of people after Trump's reelection called me crying, freaking out. What do I do? Does anything matter anymore? How do I make sure that I'm actually making a difference? Here's a really concrete, specific thing you can do. Wisconsin's right here. I know a lot of you like to go to, the Dells or whatever. You can go online, go to her website, make a donation. You can go to operationswingstate.com, which is the initiative based here in Illinois that sends volunteers up to Wisconsin to plug in and door knock. So I just think we've had a bleak conversation, but here's the thing you can actually do to make a difference. Is get involved in the race. It's April 1st. It's only 2.5 weeks away.
Yeah. And everything is sort of like a run up to 2028 in so many ways. And this is sort of the first one. I mean, I know there's some special congressional races in Florida and in New York. We've talked about them briefly on the show. Most of those are in Republican districts, so it's very unlikely that Dems would win. But this is a pivotal moment. And ordinarily, I would say, Crawford's going to win. The Democrats are going to win on this one. Particularly because the issue of abortion. So Schimmel is this fervently anti-choice, believes like a law from the 19th century should go back on the books, which would pretty outlaw abortion in the state of Wisconsin. And the trends have been that pro-choice movements have won on the state level when abortion's the pivotal issue. Working against that is, as you said, Elon Musk and kicking in $8 million. Charlie Kirk, Gavin Newsom's new friend, but a joke. I can't get over that, Joanna. I just cannot get over the Gavin Newsom strategy. I'm sorry. It just really irritates the hell out of me at some level. I know that's what they want to do. Okay, Joanna, but I didn't expect Democrats to be trolling me. All right. Anyway,
it's not great.
It's not great. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on that tangent. And I've been so calm throughout this show, Joanna. I really had been. Anyway, Charlie Kirk is coming with baby Donnie. They're going to do some kind of fundraising for Schimmel.
And we're just in this environment where I think for those of us who are appalled and horrified by everything the Trump administration is doing, we don't always know where to cast our attention. They've intentionally created this environment where there's fires all around us and we don't know where to dump the buckets of water at first. I would suggest this April 1st election for the Wisconsin Supreme Court is a really good place for people, your listenership, to focus their energy right now. So operationswingstate.com, sign up, go take a day, go to Wisconsin. It's going to be nice weather, probably. Maybe we might be in third winter soon, but we'll see.
Yeah. And even if it's not nice weather, go up there.
Yeah, we're tough. Let's put on a hat, okay? It's going to be fine.
I take walks every day. Even in the
take
rain.
A walk, knock on some doors.
Anyway, Joanna, thank you very much. I love talking to you. Love talking politics to you. Ladies and gentlemen, one day I'm going to secretly record one of our conversations. She won't know about it. I'm going to put that out there. You'll be like, whoa!
Ruin me.
F-bomb flying, okay? She cleaned up her act.
No, boy. It's fun.
F-bomb flying, but not today. And I appreciate that. So anyway, Joanna, love talking to you. Take care, all right?
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. I also want to thank producer Chris. He does an outstanding job. And I know Joanna agrees with me when I say, hey, producer Chris, give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Peace and love, everybody.